Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Furidashi podcast. I am Nicholas,
And I'm Lauren.
and today we are going to again talk about D&D. And when I say again, I mean because there is a lost episode.
Ooh, this
And
is
by
very
lost,
Dungeons and Dragons. The
by lost,
lost episodes of Furidashi.
yeah, by that I mean there was an episode that we in fact did record. In fact, it was a pretty good episode, but my audio was atrocious.
And so, as I am wont to do, I say this is the universe, right? Telling us that this is Kismet. We were not supposed to record that D&D episode. We are supposed to record this one, whatever it may
Yes.
be.
Whatever, yeah, because actually this one is less planned than the other one was. But I mean, I felt it would be a pretty good follow-up to one, the Takeshi and Hiroshi chill rant that I recorded 2 weeks ago, and also then the discussion that we had last time about sort of like self-insertion and sort of like first-person objectivity versus first-person subjectivity. Because, well, once again, this is so from my perspective, I'm going to be talking about it in terms of like the game I'm currently running with my wife and daughter. So the obvious connection with the Takeshi and Hiroshi situation. And Lauren, you have been off and on working on your own homebrew,
I
originally
have
from
been.
3.5, right?
It was originally 3.5 and heavily modified 3.5. This was back when 5 didn't exist.
Yeah.
This was also back when Pathfinder just came out. So this is around D&D 4. And D&D 4 was changed to very much a video game style of play.
Yeah.
And I say that because it was actually more mechanics driven than D&D 3.5, which, as you've seen those character sheets, feels very mechanics driven.
Yeah.
I'm also participating in a Dungeons of Dragons campaign right now on a weekly or every other week basis, depending on our schedules, because we're all game developers. And that one takes place in Neverwinter.
Yeah. My setting is kind of a non-setting. In fact, this is the thing that I often do with new players because sometimes I have to sort of feel them out. Like the world that I'm going to be constructing is sort of vaguely Avatar, but it's only vaguely Avatar in the sense that my wife wanted to play an elemental monk. And a lot of the elemental monk abilities are clearly Avatar ripoffs if you read them. Like one of them is literally called Water Whip. Like that's
Yeah.
taken and it's taken and like
But
it's
can she
mechan-
bloodbend? That's the question.
It would be cool to like try and homebrew something like bloodbending, but that's not. But also, monks aren't really spellcasters. Like even when they can cast spells, they're pretty limited in terms of like
Advanced
what they can
class,
do.
advanced class.
Maybe
Necro monks,
no,
necro monks.
there's going to be no prestige classes, none of that. We're not doing any of that stuff, especially since
Oh,
one of the people I have
boo.
playing is completely new and wanted to play a war domain cleric. That's my daughter, and so yeah, no. So
And
that's
his
the
daughter
situation.
would be a great war domain cleric for any D&D nerds out there. Oh, yeah.
I think she's actually not liking it. I think she didn't realize what it entailed because she keeps trying to cast. She keeps trying to be primarily a spellcaster, and I'm like, but you realize that you chose a version of cleric that is more like melee fighting focused. Like the
I
the,
see.
the initial abilities you get like are all about like either like adding bonuses to your melee attack rolls or
You
like
might
adding
have to
bonuses
just
to
homebrew it for her, to be honest.
possibly or just
That's
like
what I found with new
yeah
players is that I had a group of 7 of my friends, not including myself, and one other dungeon master who said he would co-DM with me, which is how my homebrew started. And we had to find a setting in a world and mechanics that would have support a 7-person Dungeons and Dragons campaign around the table.
yeah. But
We
this
ended
is
up splitting up the groups, to be fair, but it was all self-taught or
yeah.
self-split. We were like, guys, choose a direction to fight this battle.
For me, that's why I think it actually. So when I run a table, and by run a table, I mean like I am the one who is the game master of the things that are happening.
Yeah. So when
So
we talk about the table, right, we are talking about the physical space that could now be Zoom, right?
yeah,
For those of us on multiple coastlines or like locations around the world, the table is the play space
yeah,
as a video game, say the world, right? So on the table means stuff that happens on the table
yeah,
or around the table, right?
yeah,
It's the theater of the mind. And when you run the table, running the game because it's a tabletop game.
yeah.
This is different than board games where the board game is the game master, just so that we can
Yeah.
clarify, because a board game could be a tabletop game, but it is very, very different than a human being, right, running the table.
Although there are companies like Asmodee that are starting to make games that a lot of games that actually require like one person to essentially function as a game master,
Yeah,
other
and there's
people
also
will,
Mansions
yeah.
of Madness, which is like half app DM, half video game,
Okay, yeah.
half
So
tabletop.
in the first version of that game, one like when the original analog version of Mansions of Madness, you did actually have to have someone
Yeah.
GM it. But now you can, yeah, as you said, you can do it
But
with an
now
app.
it's the yeah.
Okay, so the reason why I construct a world that is kind of non-determinate is as often with new players, like they genuinely don't know what they're doing, and you kind of have to feel them out, and you kind of have to figure out like what it is that they want to try to achieve. And in order to invite them in and like make a lot of the complex mechanics of D&E less hostile, is to sort of construct a world around the way they're playing rather than have a fully formed world in which that character is dropped. I mean, that's the more typical way of playing D&D, is that sort of like you have the megalomaniacal DM who is like, "Oh, I have this entire world figured out in my brain and all these branching paths and all these things that I'm going to throw at them." And I think that works for experienced players because oftentimes experienced players want to essentially play that world, like they want to try and figure that world out. But if you have someone who is very uncomfortable with just the character and their mechanics, it's helpful in my mind, especially like because I have actually run tables with kids before. It's helpful to have at available to you the ability to create a world for them. And so the reason why I think this links back to what I said on my, my lonesome about Takeshi and Hiroshi is because Takeshi begins the game with like his own preconception of what he wants his game to be. But then when his kid brother starts playing it, he realizes like, no, actually, I've got to redesign these levels so as to be better suited for my kid brother. So that way he is both challenged, but also that it's not too challenging that he just like rage quits out of it.
Right. And that's exactly what got me directly into, honestly, my grad school program, was the fact that I ran this homebrew campaign and I understood the fundamental truth of game development is that it's not about the level or the art or the animation or the game, right, that you are making until you get it into a user or a player's hands and they go, I don't understand. This isn't fun. What do you mean I have to like wait until level 3? What's going on? Where am I going? I mean, like it's just horrible. Or better or worse, right? Is they put it in your hands and suddenly they can't play it because it's too difficult, it's too confusing. They're stuck in a room and they don't realize they can open the door. They
Yeah.
can't see the door, even though you've put literal spotlights on the door. They just thought it was a stage because the spotlights obviously are only on stages.
Yeah.
Like this has happened to me.
Hmm.
Right? And so playing Dungeons and Dragons and also running the table was apparently like this very, I didn't think of it as anything special because I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
So I'm like, telling stories is what I do. This isn't special. But that was actually really fundamental of game development. And
Yeah.
so Takeshi and Hiroshi, right, when you have his younger brother needing is like, I don't like these. And you're like, crap. And you go back to the drawing board. You do that in game dev so often
Yeah.
and you don't do it live. So to do it all around the table, right, for your players, I
Yeah.
really, really relate to that because that's kind of my methodology is that you have to, right, tailor the experience to your players if they're not getting it or they're not having fun.
Well, and also because, especially within the world of not just D&D, but like tabletop role playing in general, game masters slash dungeon masters are actually pretty rare. Like a lot of people have a hard time getting a game started precisely for lack of a DM. And one of the reasons for this is because also often a lot of the work, like the actual work of the game,
Yeah.
falls on the DM. And it takes a particularly well, it takes people like us, people who like write constantly, people who are thinking constantly, people who like produce just tons and tons of material, much of which never gets used in any way, shape, or form. And in many ways, being a DM is like that. Like you have to have certain ideas of where things could go. I mean, one of the most like common strategies that you employ as a dungeon master in a game is you create a crisis moment and you have to be aware of all the possible ways in which your players could react. So in many ways, you have to have something
And we're not
prepared for.
talking
Yeah, sorry, go.
Yeah, no, and you have to have some. You were going to say you have to have something prepared for each of them.
Yeah,
However, there are the ways that you don't even think about.
exactly. Yes.
So it doesn't, at the end of the day, my style of dungeon mastering, right, is actually, and I'll also say game mastery, because dungeon master is actually a trademarked registered concept
Yes.
specifically to Wizards of the Coast. So game
Boo.
mastering,
Boo.
boo. So game mastering is something that, like, that's my style. My style is, honestly, at the end of the day, like, I can run a better session if it's impromptu and I have nothing prepared,
Yeah.
because I have actually pre-prepared so much about the world and the lore.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I will say, where you dropped your characters into a, like, kind of a fuzzy setting,
yeah.
I think maybe from a player's perspective, I start off that way, but I actually really encourage my players to be very proactive in, like, reading the world. And that's why
Yeah.
I focus on the world setting so much, is that I'm like, hey, this is the world, setting, etc. And in this talk now, I realize, like, I didn't actually put a very key thing in my beginner's guide, and I'm going to take a note so that I do that.
Well,
So
and the other,
thanks.
no, but you're right. The your players will reveal things to you that you never even thought possible. And so one of the things that I had to deal with right away, especially with in terms of dealing with my daughter's gameplay, is that she didn't want to kill things at all. And there is a way to do non-lethal damage in D&D, but also like constructing a world in which like your player characters are primarily trying to like knock out humanoid opponents, tie them up, bring them to jail. Like oftentimes it's easier to create a kind of what is in the lingo referred to as like a murder hobo situation, where essentially your group of players are ones who like they kill something and then move on to the next thing and then kill something and then move on to the next thing and kill something and move on to the next thing.
I really like that you call them murder hobos.
No, that's a term that's existed for a
No,
while.
I've actually,
Yeah.
I'm sure I've heard of it. It's just like, that's great.
Well, I mean, because it's very descriptive. Like it sort of describes what's going on.
Well, and it's interesting because, like, you're talking about human opponents, right?
Well, it's not. It's also like there are monsters that she doesn't want to kill too. So like
Bless her.
she's a my daughter is she's a I don't know, she's a great person, but also at the same time like the way she sees like the world of fantasy. Because the thing is, she's also played of the people in my house. She's played far more video games than literally everybody else, including me. Like she plays them constantly, and she also plays a far wider variety of video games than either I or my wife do. And so she has experienced plenty of games in which like you're supposed to like kill the baddies and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like she's never experienced that before. However, for some reason, when she has inserted herself into a character, and it's not just that, but also the character that she has inserted herself into is a character she created like art for and a backstory for long before this D&D game came into existence. So she has preconceptions about who this character is, like morally and ethically and the full gamut. Like it's a fully fleshed out person. And so, well, it's actually not a person. It's a
I understand what
yeah.
you're saying, though, is that when you self insert into a Dungeons and Dragons, uh, or any sort of tabletop game, role playing game,
Yeah.
right? It could be Vampire the Masquerade. You self insert as that vampire, right? To continue the vampire trend that I'm doing.
Yeah.
And
So
when you,
if you're Edward, if you're playing Edward in Vampire the Masquerade.
oh God, no, let's be Lestat. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, okay.
Right. But when you're playing Vampire the Masquerade, a lot of the times I mean, there is the tabletop game, but honestly, you go to a masquerade session, it's just an actual, like, group of humans sitting on chairs, like, almost in like a circle, like drinking or like eating,
Yeah,
the crumpets or whatever, and just being like, oh, we're like obviously just dancing in this ball, and you're all just like sitting on the floor talking. Like,
yeah,
that's really it.
yeah,
And I think that when you self insert, though, and you have those self preconceived notions, that preconception comes through immediately, right, to the people hosting or the people running the game,
yeah.
because they'll go, this person is about to get their, good Lord, I need to say, I need a mature way of, an unmature way of saying this, like a rating PG. Um, they're about to get their butt whooped. There we go. That's the, like, I
What?
can't,
Just say ass kicked. It's fine.
I can't even. no, I was gonna. They're gonna get their ass handed to them,
Yeah.
especially like if they're in a session where you're younger and you're playing. You have, especially younger people when they come in with that. I'm the power player. This is my
Yeah.
power fantasy. I'm Edward. I need to be in this moment. I'm Lestat, right?
Yeah.
Or like they come to D and they're like, I'm the broody rogue. Don't you know my backstory where both my parents were killed in an alley and I need to get revenge on whoever did it? Um, yeah, that's Batman.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, like you're playing Batman and you have that preconceived notion. Well, suddenly, right, someone comes at you and goes, I lived in the darkness. I was the darkness. Right? And then you're like, oh, wait, that's me. But actually, oh, you're right.
You have to cover your face
Oh,
for
you're in the darkness. I can't even do it. I can't. I'm like, I'm the darkness. Help me. Yay.
why is your main voice so inexplicable? Sorry.
Okay. The point being, though, is I hope you're laughing with us because the point being is that you self
Hopefully.
insert into these really powerful characters, right? Into her. This is her powerful character, right? This is her moment. And you, not only as her
Yeah.
DM, but as her father, right, have to
Yes.
either
Yeah, so
have
so
like
that
this choice,
that's
right?
an important aspect right there because the thing is like I'm also not running a table for a bunch of randos that I sort of vaguely know or like I'm friends with one of them but the others I'm not really that familiar with. Like this is my family. Like this is a person that I have known literally their entire life from like the moment of conception to now. Like
Yeah.
so I can't kill her character at all. Like in many ways, it's a self imposition. Like I feel like I'm not allowed to kill her character or put her character in like. So here's something that happened. First session, they did the classic like you're on a cart, you arrive in town, you're stopping at a tavern, and here's the scenario that I set up. Like there was this family that was part of another caravan that was being intimidated by literally the by a thug. In fact, if you look in the monster manual, it's literally thug that's there. Um, which is not a particularly powerful it's a fighter essentially. It's like a reskinned fighter. And my daughter's character and she saw this happening and immediately attacked this guy. And I'm like, this guy is going to kill her. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
literally in that moment, I invented another character who was sitting in the same tavern, who was essentially like I don't know. You've seen like old like wuxia films, like the sort of like the old like hermit, like kung fu guy who has like the long flowy beard that he sort of is
Yeah.
constantly
Yeah.
playing with, like big Fu Manchu beard. I literally invented this character out of thin air to intervene and like protect my daughter's character because she literally was about to get killed.
Yeah,
Um,
honestly, that just sounds like that needs to be a home like rule set because I have a lot of home rules
yeah,
that I don't honestly know that I have until I start playing. But I don't kill my players' characters unless they're asking for it, right?
yeah,
And this is coming from even if it's my sister, who I've known her whole life because she is right younger than me.
yeah,
But that's different than if it was, say, my like child, who I'm actually responsible for teaching good moral ethics. I guess as an older sister, I
or
was responsible for that for my younger sister, but not to the extent of a parent, right? There's that power
yeah,
dynamic, right? Because you could ground them,
yeah.
right? So you don't want to like that to them is right the worst. So now you're gonna kill their self-insert
Well,
character is
here,
like
well,
that.
no,
That's
here's the
killing
funny thing.
them.
Because I adopted this like self-imposed restriction on me that I wasn't going to kill. Like this is now a recurring character in our campaign. This character I literally created. It was just a random like fifth level monk from like what I could remember of like fifth level monk skills. And because like I had to think to myself like, okay, like who is somebody that could intervene and could immediately stun this guy? Like, okay, a monk, stunning strike. So literally, like he intervenes, like, and it almost didn't work. Like the thug almost saved, but then at least he would be attacking this monk guy, and then instead of my daughter, but no, he stunned him, and then that opened up sort of an RP session. But then also because my wife's character was also a monk, it meant that like he could then become a kind of like I don't know, mentor for her character. And this is literally and so this is what we were talking about earlier, like these things where like your players will do things that you do not anticipate. And quite often the things that you do in reaction to them to try and like save the situation then become the really sort of powerful moments in your game. And so to take this back to the realm of game design and sort of the point that I was trying to make about Takeshi and Hiroshi, this idea that like if you cultivate your players, if you care for your players, because that's the thing is that like in doing this for my daughter, I'm sort of creating the space in which she can grow and learn in that game. And by creating that for her, I also like fundamentally improved my abilities as a DM to sort of like construct a world and sort of like a situation for them to play in. And the problem that I often see with game developers is sort of like they become detached from that
Yeah.
relationship.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think that when you're making a game, and detachment is hard too,
Yeah.
right? And I would say detachment is hard because you get very attached to maybe a feature that you're working on, and then suddenly that feature is
Yeah.
cut. You're very attached to the player and maybe the user profile, but suddenly, everyone on the team, or maybe the game director or the creative director, like whatever that title is.
Yeah.
And I say title, but I truly mean like the decision maker, the one who actually has the true high level vision and picture, starts to change that vision. And so suddenly, what you were attached to in the player profile that you really liked, and most generally is someone maybe that's exactly like you, you're now
Yeah.
making a game for someone who isn't like you at all,
Yeah.
right? And now you're suddenly having to cultivate and care about someone you
Yeah.
would never care about,
Exactly.
right? And this is especially true if you're, say, working on a single player title or a multiplayer title, and you have to almost detach. If you're like, I only play single player, high intensity, high action narratives like Tomb Raider or like Uncharted, I only play these games, I only ever want to play these games, these are the games that I want to make because
Yeah.
that's my portfolio, right? Like
Yeah.
that's my repertoire. On the other hand, right, you'll be like, oh, these are the multiplayer co-op games, like I only work in MMOs, I only ever want to do MMOs,
Yeah.
right? And that's why we as game developers say you need to play a lot of games, is not so much because we think that playing, like, and to be fair, like playing games is the be and end all of it, like just play a lot. It's that you need to understand the people, right, that you are going to create a game for,
Yeah.
whether it
Exactly.
be, right, that Tomb Raider, or whether it's that um uh, I literally blinked on the name for some reason because I got another thought. But World of Warcraft, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's World of Warcraft or League of Legends, right? Like it's a
Yeah.
totally different game.
Yeah.
You need to have at least experienced it a little bit. And honestly, if you haven't, just watch people play that really, really love it and watch how they react to it, right? Because it's that sentimentality, it's that emotional connection they're getting for. But I really do
Yeah.
think that detachment is can be hard, but it is also very easy for developers when suddenly you realize the thing you've been cultivating is wasted, right? Work, and now you
Mhm.
have to cultivate a totally different relationship with other people.
Well, in many ways, it's almost imperative to then develop a different kind of mindset about it, because the thing is, it's very easy to, and this is not exclusive to video game design. This is in any creative form in existence. In fact, in the
Or
plastic,
perhaps just to interject very quickly, is any creative performance um, that is a performance in that you are doing something for someone else. So a graphic designer, someone who makes logos, is easy. But I would say that if you're creating an art piece for yourself, right, that's the intent, that yourself, right, is your customer. You are doing art for you.
I
But
would
I would
disagree, because I think there is a thing that is often like in art instruction, they call it becoming too precious. It's this idea in which like the thing that you're creating, regardless of whether it's for somebody else or for yourself, becomes overworked precisely because you become too insular about it. And so the thing, in other words, it becomes, the more it is about you and the more you sort of become not just like invested in terms of time, but also emotionally invested in the thing that you're working on. Like
I see what you're
you
saying.
start to miss things that even later you will be like, why did I do that? And
I
so
understand. I
yeah,
understand. So please continue on your point.
yeah.
I don't
So
disagree with that.
yeah,
I don't fully agree with the first way that you said it, but let's keep
yeah.
going.
No, no, no. You're right. Like I think that this formulation is actually somewhat better, because the thing is, like getting rid of that preciousness is really important. One, because as I noted in my chill rant, like nearly all game design, especially in the modern world, is collective labor. Like you have to be able to do this alongside other people. And so if you think about this sort of like, let's say, a more curatorial way of looking at game design, in other words, instead of thinking about like what kinds of ideas and things and like say objects or levels or whatever it is that you happen to be working on, instead of me trying to sort of like focus on and like cultivate that, if you if you sort of shift your focus to like, who am I doing this for? Because it could be for yourself, it could be for somebody else, it could be for your family, it could be for like a broader audience, it could be for like, say greater representation of like marginalized communities. Like if you're doing it for someone else, this is the easiest way to explain it, then in many ways you don't feel as precious about the specific things that you do. It is actually easier to get over them because you're keeping the focus on like who it is that you're trying to communicate to and what it is that you're trying to communicate to them.
Yeah, and this is actually really good for a dungeon master or the D&D plus like game development, right? Is that because in dungeon mastering, you are creating an experience. And if you just think about the story you've designed and you want to tell, this will create something we call the on rails
Yep.
experience, right? That's the Uncharted, that's the Tomb Raider.
Yep.
There is a very directed story that you are going to get through. And by golly, if you have to look up how to solve the color puzzle, you're going to look it up so you can get through it, right?
Yeah.
Versus something that is not designer driven, right? Is a little bit more player driven. And while technically it's linear, Journey is a lot more of a player driven design because they don't really tell you what to do or where to go. You have to experience it through playing the game.
Yeah.
And while I would say Skyrim would fit maybe that like dungeon masterless, like sandboxy environment, you could also say Minecraft. Journey is a really great example of what a dungeon crawling experience is kind of about, in that you are, say, like the wordless DM, so to speak, but you're kind of just guiding players through this experience. And the player is just engaging with that world. And then how that world reacts to you is actually what determines your next course of action.
Yeah.
Right. And when the world gets more confined and smaller and you see the path of you as up ahead because your DM says there's a staircase or Journey says this is the staircase, it changes the camera angle on you. You
Yeah.
now realize this is where you need to go.
Yeah.
And in game development, right? So outside of the game, you're developing Journey. If they had tried to make this game for players that very specifically wanted that Tomb Raider experience, they would not have made the decisions that they
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Right. And as game developers, you need to have that healthy detachment from, say, your individual features, but also need to still be very cognizant. Because even myself as a game designer, I play those single player like games, or when I play an MMO, I'm used to that questing behavior.
Yeah.
But, if you look at the multiplayer titles that I've worked on, obviously they were not of that, like, they're not of that vein.
Yeah.
They're of actually a much more cooperative or experience.
Well, yeah, because there's,
And that's very different. It's just very different to design that. I have to be cognizant that even if I say something thinking it will work in a multiplayer space,
yeah,
right? Like on Dungeon Defenders 2, like I know what tower defense is. I know, right, working on that title, that I was like, hey, we need to put more story in these veins.
Yeah.
Because of the person that I am, and because of what my focus is on, which is the personal experience of our players,
Yeah.
it will still come across as if I'm looking at one player versus, right, the 4 that we had. And the same way
Yeah.
it was true with Avengers.
And in many ways, you can talk about the same phenomenon, like the good version and bad version, because railroading is the sort of the bad version, because it definitely feels like you're forcing your players to do something regardless of what their opinions about
I
it
will
may
say
be.
that railroading in Dungeons and in D&D
Yeah.
specifically,
Yeah.
because if you are playing a Tomb Raider because you want to have that experience, being on rails
Yeah.
isn't
Well, no,
necessarily.
because I think that another way of thinking of it is not actually railing, but is more like scaffolding. In other words, you're creating a sort of specific structure that sort of supports a particular framework. However, like, I mean, to use an example of, say, like, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, or any of the like the most recent Tomb Raider games,
Right, yeah.
then even within the sort of like fairly straight linear progression, like there is still wiggle room in there. Whereas
Yes.
railroading is literally like, so like, you throw your character into a room and there is like, say a demon that they have to fight. It's like, I am a demon. And then, your characters are like, okay, actually, no, we don't think we can fight this demon, so we're going to try and teleport out. And you're like, and then the DM goes like, no, this is a special room that you can't teleport out of. And they're like, Okay, so like, okay, well then what we're gonna try and banish the demon. Like, no, the demon can't be banished. It's like, if you like keep trying, if you keep putting things in your player's way that sort of forces them,
You know what? That's it.
yeah, that sort of prevents them from doing.
No, I was going to say
Yeah,
that is perfect.
yeah, like
No, I hate, sorry.
yeah, that's railroading.
No,
It's
that's
yeah,
definitely, yeah, that is a
yeah,
great example. I'm sorry that I talked over it, but it's like,
no, it's fine.
that's Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry is that game. You have to,
Yeah,
you go into that experience and you're going to be on rails. But you're right. In Uncharted and in Tomb Raider, there is still that flexibility of that slightly RP element
yes,
where you have the hub worlds and they're like, okay, now you can start crafting. Now you can start hunting for um, like all of the deer or like the whatever you need. You can
yeah,
start realizing you can't kill the chickens in the forest. Like this makes no sense. I need feathers. Why can't I get feathers from chickens? Right. And then there's that interplay where
yeah.
you're like, oh, I'm fighting because I've been railroaded against the chicken. They are not killable, but I can kill all the hawks.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, there is a way to do linear progression in, narrative game design where you're still giving at least the illusion of choice. Like, even if like the choices are pretty limited, then you're at least giving your player some sense of like that self-insertion.
No, exactly. And I
Yeah,
think that that's where like the self-insertion comes when we look at the BioWare genre of games is that you have this illusion of choice in that it's just you're doing an emotion when there actually is a choice point. That choice point is usually binary and it's presented to you, but it eventually right meets up with the actual like trunk of the tree, so to
yeah,
speak, right? And I do think that in other games, right, like in Skyrim, it also has linearity, but a lot of the stories come from like the side quests and the non-linearity, but its story is indefinitely linear, right?
yeah,
We don't really actually see nonlinear stories in games necessarily because even in branching, like it's just a measure of content, right? You
yeah,
could branch infinitum, I think something like in Disco Elysium, but then the amount of content in that game, right? I don't think
yeah,
hasn't necessarily been in a AAA title in a while. But in
well,
others,
yeah,
right, nonlinear progression doesn't necessarily mean unlinear,
yeah,
right? They're and especially when you're dungeon mastering, like you're saying, you made that monk. He's now a mentor, and he will reoccur. But also the nonlinearity of your gameplay is it's still chosen right by what your daughter and where she wants to go next,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, and also, so going back to that specific game, it's like the thing is, in many ways, my players are kind of on a linear path. It's one that sort of I have vaguely in my head, and if they choose, but the difference is that, and I think this is really sort of the important lesson to sort of bring everything back together, is that when it's clear that your players want something else, when they want to deviate, to create the means in which they can deviate. In other words, if you have a fairly clear path in mind and they come up against an obstacle and they want to deal with it in a way that's different from what you want them to do, that's harder to do with a video game precisely because it's pre-programmed for the most part. I mean, you can have certain like algorithmic functions, you can have certain like variable systems, but that's still going to be limited. I mean, one of the advantages of a tabletop role-playing game is that like, yeah, you could literally can invent an entirely new path out of thin air in the moment.
Right,
It's
and that's
not
the theater of the mind.
Yeah, it's not always a great idea to do that because you'll probably run into problems later on and not remembering the thing that you made up. However, like there still is a core lesson there, and it's the same as the lesson in Takeshi and Hiroshi. It's the same in D&D. It's the same even in these sort of like fairly linear games. It's still like the BioWare games, as you mentioned, that still allow you a degree of wiggle room because it's saying like we want you to do this general thing. However, at the same time, we recognize that you're human beings and you're going to want to have a certain degree of variety and like different approaches
Well,
to,
is that why you,
you know,
yeah, and is that why you think that these like MMOs and like kind of the constant patch updates or constant content changes, like Fortnite, right? Fortnite
yeah,
is actually a really kind of interesting example because it plops you into a world that is a, say, battle royale,
yeah,
and the purpose is to shoot people. But I was playing the other day and I literally just fished for guns and then was like, kind of like the meat decoy of my
yeah,
team, right? Where I was like, oh, look, I'm shooting at you. And then I would like run off and then people would kind of circle around,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because I am very good at not getting hit, but I am very bad at shooting. And I think that that's actually kind of interesting to me when you to hear you say like you can kind of create it out of thin air. Is that, do you feel like it's harder to design games when you like if you don't have that very specific person in mind, right? With Takeshi and Hiroshi, or in some ways does that just mean that if there
Well,
is a very specific manner of play, right? Or you have that specific user, then do you bite yourself in the foot because you don't have enough options later down the line?
well, we're on a continuum again. So on this end of the continuum, there's like it's literally a person you know in your life, and like you understand them, and you have this like intimate relationship with them. And then over here, you're just completely detached. You're making Tetris, where like really the person is kind of irrelevant, and it's just here are game mechanics. It is a puzzle system in real time. That's it. But the thing is, like, that's a continue. So there are middle points along that way, and in many ways, MMOs are a good example of one of the middle points where there is a world that is created, and within that world, like especially when it comes to like character progression and rating and so forth, there are things that the developers are far more focused on. Nevertheless, there are still things that people do within those worlds that have nothing to do with what the developers want them to do. I mean, that's why you get, especially in MMOs, you get like gambling systems, or like you can go to a concert in Final Fantasy 14, or you can have people doing dead rolls in World of Warcraft, or you can have people who are like doing like I remember there was this one time when there were so in Dark Age of Camelot, which is a very PvP focused game, there were pacifists in Dark Age of Camelot. And so like the
I
game
feel like
allows
do
for
you
that.
yeah, and do you feel like if you have that strong world narrative, right? Like bringing it back to D&D, like I'm curious why you threw your players into this kind of generic fuzzy world, right? Because they were new and you wanted them to
Yeah.
kind of know the mechanics. But were you actually creating a mechanics driven experience because now you're on that Tetris spectrum where they're like, well, you can't do those things, versus you see these areas where they have a huge world, and now you're talking about like the MMOs where they start to be freer. Would your players have been freer if you had said, here's this world with like 50 cities, like which one do you go to?
Well, I think what I created was more like an iterative process. Because the thing is, the reason why, because the thing is, it's starting to cohere now. Like
Okay.
it was only initially, it's not like permanently fuzzy. It's only fuzzy in those initial stages, precisely because I need to see how these players are going to play. Like, what kinds of things are they likely to do? And I don't want to like close too much of that off. Like, in other words, it's sandboxy initially, precisely because like, okay, like what are they going to do when put in like any old environment? Okay, now I have a better sense of this, and now I can do this. So it's one of the reasons why I created a tag along character for them. Also because there are aspects of the game that they were just completely unaware of, and that you don't really experience. Because the thing is,
Yeah, absolutely.
unless a dungeon master puts it in front of you, you don't necessarily have it, like an experience of it. There aren't clear tutorials for like
Right.
playing a pre-written campaign, which I don't like to do just
I
personally.
also don't like pre-written campaigns. Actually,
Yeah,
this has been really insightful because I think that I had a very bad DM experience. Not very bad. That's actually a bad moniker. I had a very like weird DM experience. It wasn't really fun. It was just unfun. There we go. And it was because we were playing the same characters where we switched GMs because we were like a friend group and one of our friends wanted to run like a very specific kind of like story. But then it turned out that instead of running that specific story, all our characters were used to just being put into like a kind of a larger world and then playing. And
yeah,
so this has been really insightful because I think that now by running like a campaign, you do kind of see that the games that are becoming more and more sandboxy at the beginning and like
yeah,
tailoring that experience based on your play, you see a lot more of games like that, especially Fortnite being like the biggest example,
yeah,
right? Is that, yeah, you plopped into a world, but go fish, go hunt for wild boars now,
yeah.
or like,
Go
or
find construction materials.
go find construction materials,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Or go do other things. And so I
yeah.
think that's been awesome because it's kind of interesting to see how Dungeons and Dragons has actually, right? You can kind of actually see elements to it in a game like Fortnite.
Okay, so we went a little bit longer today because Lauren and I are going to be going on hiatus for about a month. We need to recharge our batteries. I also need to get caught up on my teaching stuff, which I'm sort of perennially behind on. But Lauren, while we're gone, where can people go to yell at us on social media?
Please yell at us on social media. At YouTube, we are Furidashi Pod, and also on Twitter at Furidashi Pod. You can yell at me specifically by at the Lauren Ash. That's Lauren with a Y. Or you can yell at Nicholas a little bit more
With my
indirectly
yeah,
through at
yeah.
Furidashi Pod.
Well, also
Okay.
my
That's what I
personal
would
one, yeah.
say.
You can get. I'll give my
What's your
personal one.
personal one? Go ahead
So
and spell it.
at UAHSENAA at Wasana. It's a Middle Egyptian word I made up.
It's very cool. Honestly, if you can figure out how to be like Noctis to St. Clair Lunia, like the 13th, I think people can learn how to say Uwania. Is that what it was?
Wasana. So Wasana.
Wasana. Okay. If you can learn how to say Final Fantasy names, you can learn how to say Uwasana.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So
Just saying.
yeah. So we will be back sometime either at the end of April or the beginning of May with another thrilling episode of the Furidashi podcast. But until then, we want you all to stay safe, stay healthy, and
stay tuned on our social media.
yeah, thanks guys. Bye.